So what's PCP for me? I think it's a spice. It's a spice for life, in my life. I think it colours the eyes that I have. I see everything through the lens of PCP. And it's like a secret language, it's a secret code. It's a bit of magic. And it's always something you can come back to. And it's the way to interpret one's world. And I think it's very playful. You know, when I change things into Kellyan language, words like aggressiveness and fragmentation and permeability, it always makes me smile. So I think PCP for me is energy. That's the way I would see it.
I met Kelly when I was doing my undergraduate program in psychology in the 60s, middle 60s. And Kelly was the reason, he was not being taught on the course, but Kelly was the reason that I remained in psychology, because I found these 2 volumes, which hadn't been published very long at that time, on the library, in the shelf. And I still remember the day reading some Kelly and thinking, oh thank God, maybe I can stay with psychology now. And that went on like that. I kept returning to Kelly, and it started out for me at that time with that notion of no one need be a victim of their biography. Now, I didn't agree with that entirely, but it's what PCP continues to mean for me, I think, is possibilities of. It's invitational to be optimistic.
I remember as an undergraduate reading Inquiring Man and thinking, what's that about? I couldn't get to understand it, it was just too complicated. And when I was a trainee, Miller Mayer came as my new head of department, and at the time everything was it was behaviour therapy, there wasn't even cognitive behaviour therapy, and I hated it. And so when this man came along and said there is another way of looking at things, that was an enormous revelation. Yes, I came at it through theory, but also seeing somebody live and demonstrate PCP, I suppose. And I was very lucky to have a year with Miller in the mid-70s.
Well, my first thought was, as I said, why wasn't I told about this? Why did no one tell me about this in 5 years of psychological study? And so, because I was then teaching philosophy, I stayed with the theory. It wasn't applicable to what I was doing as a clinician. I only did 1 day a week in a clinic and 1 day in private practice, but I didn't have any training in the techniques. But of course, I realised that it's eclectic as to techniques. There's the disadvantages of that and advantages, but that meant I could keep the theoretical framework and do various things. Up until that time, I thought psychoanalysis was probably the most thorough and comprehensive psychology, and I wrote a paper some time back about the connection between PCP and psychoanalysis, and said in the days when people wanted to integrate cognitive therapy that we would just as well off integrating the psychodynamic perspectives, because it had much more affinities with it. I'm still talking at a theoretical level. So my first thought was, why don't I know more of this? How can I learn to do it? I can't, there's no one here who can teach me that. So I'll just go down the philosophy track and write papers on philosophy, eventually a book, and then some other papers. And I've done a couple of applied papers, one on anorexia nervosa with a colleague, and death in anorexia nervosa, but mainly I've written theoretical work, and that's never disappointed me. It's never let me down as an orientation to life and to what I do.
So there's an Australian, Chris Lamming, who has also written about anger, and he showed me this very useful thing, that if I go, you do this, that and the other, this finger is pointing at you, but the other 3 are pointing at me. And I think that's a really nice physical example of how PCP makes you think about, where do I fit within this before I try to make you fit me? And maybe that thing of lived experience, PCP, I think, influences the way that I actually think about things, think about life, I think Mary used the word, it's in her DNA during this conference, and I could echo that it's very hard to think about how did I think about anxiety before a Kelleyan definition. And I think that's one of the things that's so clever about the way that Kelly used everyday words, and you forget what is the other, is there another meaning? And to go back to guilt, that sense of what am I dislodged from, just completely changes the way you think about things.
Wow. PCP is the foundation of everything I do in my work, but probably my life as well, I think. So maybe it's easier to highlight a couple of reasons why PCP for me, and it would be about possibility and therefore hopefulness. It seems important, and it is about questions rather than answers. So work in progress all the time, that's very appealing for me. And anticipation, to be forward-looking rather than being determined by the past. Those would be the key things and the key reasons I keep coming back to PCP. Plus, George Kelly has an answer for everything, in my experience, and just guidance on everything, so that I use the 2 volumes a lot. So PCP, yeah, fundamental to it. Well, my first meeting with PCP was on a very interesting course, like a course for tourists of psychotherapeutic approaches. So it was 10 weeks of transactional analysis, 10 weeks of Gestalt psychotherapy, 10 weeks of psychosynthesis, 10 weeks of something else. And by the end of it, I was feeling tired and irritable with these things. And then, suddenly, there was 10 weeks of personal construct psychology with Helen Jones, which made complete sense, immediately fitted into understanding everything that I was doing. I had a number of roles then, but I was running a family centre for young abused and disadvantaged children and their families. So with a big staff, and every aspect of my role, whether that was counselling or group work, childcare, management, supervision of staff, he at PCP was helping me with all those things at once, with no adjustment to the theory at all.
This year we will celebrate the 10 years of the Institute of Constructivist Psychology in Padua. What is ICP for you?
Well, I guess it's a lot of intelligent and creative young people who are carrying the banner for PCP. So I think it's very important to people who've been around a long time. In England, we really worry. You know, we're all getting older, and are there any younger people coming through? So for us, you know, Serbia and Italy are doing very well to train a lot of young people who will also hopefully train people in the future, and that PCP will not die.
So first impressions have been maintained that the school is very open to alternative ways of learning and to teaching. I really love the way that the students are prepared to engage in the experience and learn together in very creative ways.
Sort of great envy, I think, is what ICP is for me. When I see the numbers and the energy and the collective working on constructivist ideas, we have never had anything like that scale in Britain, and at the moment, far less than we had. So ICP is, I think, one of the great sources of hope for the PCP will survive.
I think PCP will survive only if it's able to attract young people. And you can attract younger people only on the professional level if you give them something that they can use in their professional life. A certificate. Quite simple. And I think it's one of the achievements of Padua, of the ICP, but also of some others, like in Serbia, to develop something that they can offer to young people. Not just for intellectual curiosity, but something they can use.
So what does it represent to me? I think it represents an enormous risk that somebody has taken. You know, Massimo, a very courageous enterprise to make it happen. You've made something happen, and you are part of the future, the big part of the future of constructivism and PCP. So you are a legacy, that's how I see it. And when I sometimes feel, I don't know, a little bit frustrated or down that we don't have enough people doing constructivism, I go, oh my God, thank God this is happening over there. I look at all these people, like yesterday. It was like, look at this, look at the youth, look at what's going on, and you guys and the other schools and the Serbians, it is so wonderful. So you are the future, really, and it's great to be here, to be part of that with you.